What is going on, everyone? Anthony Drew Gary here, host of the How To Show, where we talk about optimizing life, money, and happiness one how-to at a time. This week I want to talk about how to buy a vacant lot. And the reason that I want to do that is because, for two reasons really. Number one, because my wife and I just went through this process and the content is still fresh in my mind. And number two, it may be on your radar as well. You know, houses are really expensive right now. So what might it look like if you could buy yourself a piece of land and maybe build a house on it? So I want to break down maybe the top 5 or 6 things that you can do to set yourself up for success when it comes to buying a lot. And so the first thing that I really want to talk about is utilities and infrastructure. You want to make sure that whatever you have planned for the lot, you can feasibly do. And so that comes to electricity, water, sewer, gas, phone, cable, internet, all of those types of things. You need to find out whether or not it's provided in the area of the lot that you found. And if not, what can you do about it? And so the primary one's probably the non-starters for most people. If you can't get electricity to the site, that might not be a winner in terms of a place to build a house unless you plan on going off the grid, and that's a completely different episode for another day, another time, another decade even. When it comes to water and sewer, you're really talking about the same sorts of things. You either have access to them or you don't. Usually there's nothing in between. And typically you find out all of these at the local level of government. Usually the utilities are publicly regulated, and so it's either the city or the county or some sort of co-op in your area. And so you just need to start making phone calls. As awful as that sounds, you have to pick up the phone and just call people with the utility companies and find out if they service the area that you're looking for. Hopefully you have an address that you can tell them, but if not, you can usually use the address of somebody nearby, and that'll get you close, and it at least gets the conversation starting. So you want to make sure that you have the utilities that you need. You don't necessarily have to have access to water or sewer. You could theoretically be on a well or a septic tank, but you want to make sure you're checking all of your boxes to determine whatever you're looking to build, does it make sense to do it in this spot based on what utilities you have available. So the next thing I want to touch on, and I could go and teach an entire college class on this, but we're going to talk about zoning for about 30 seconds. Basically, local government has the right to influence what can and cannot be built on specific pieces of land. So you need to call your zoning department either with your city or your county and make sure that whatever you're looking to build is within the zoning guidelines for the area that you are looking to buy a piece of land. And if it's not, is there some sort of special exemption or variance process to get that done? If that can't happen, maybe it requires the full rezoning process. Typically this is a cumbersome process. And if you're looking to buy a lot to build a house on it, maybe it makes sense to just look for a different lot rather than go down this whole big path with zoning. But we needed to spend some time talking about zoning to know that it's important to think about. Just because you have found a site and you think it's a good example for where you might want to build something, the local rules and regulations may not see it that way, so you want to make sure you're looking at that. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to roughly want to have some information about the survey or the title. And a good place to start for this is every city and county typically has online now a GIS system, which is, I believe it's Geographic or Global Information System. And on this, you can get better indicators of what a parcel of land actually is. And so if it's a square or rectangular piece of land, you'll typically get the length and the width. And that's a good place to start. You can also reach out to a survey company, but maybe that makes sense after you've had some negotiations to determine whether that piece of land is for sale or not, and whether it makes sense to spend some money on a survey. I would only do that if and when you're actually going to commit to making a purchase. But when it comes to title, you can typically get in touch with a title company early on, and usually they don't charge you anything for the research as long as you are closing the transaction within the title company's office. But this varies from state to state. So if you are not in Indiana, you want to make sure that this is apples to apples with whatever it looks like in your state. So things that you want to check out in that regard, just to make sure that what you see on the map or whatever you're looking at, or if you're driving by, actually indicates how much land or what shape the land is, maybe back off of the street a little ways. You just want to go in eyes wide open with that. Next thing I want to talk about is flood zones, and I don't expect anybody to be a flood zone expert, and you really don't need to be. What I recommend you do here is you get in touch with your insurance agent and you say, hey, I'm looking for a piece of land. I'm looking at this address, blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me if this address requires flood insurance? And that's typically going to be a yes or no based on whether or not you're in a floodplain, but it's, again, just something you want to be eyes wide open to. And if for whatever reason the answer comes back, yes, this is in a flood zone, it may impact how much of that land cannot be built upon. Typically, municipalities will not let you build in flood zones, and again, typically they usually require you to leave a buffer between whatever the edge of a flood zone is and whatever the edge of the buildable area is, and so that can start to eat up into acreage really quickly. So check on your flood zones, make sure that you're not getting yourself into trouble there. The last tip that I have is to, if you can, talk to the neighbors around the site, especially if you're in a dense area or an area that's pretty well developed all the way around you. Typically, there's a reason that a vacant lot is a vacant lot, and so to the extent that you can get some of that story from the neighbors, it's usually helpful. And if you're in a more rural area where there may not be as many neighbors, this may not be an option to you, but it doesn't hurt to ask the question. At worst, you can at least get to meet and know your neighbors ahead of time, which is always a decent thing to do, so that again, you're just going eyes wide open into the different things that you could experience if you were to purchase the lot. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the How To Show on how to buy a vacant lot. Hopefully this gives you the entry level, Cliff Notes version of what you want to be thinking about when you get yourself into the mindset of buying a piece of property, and hopefully this is of some benefit to you. If you got any feedback for the show, leave me a comment down below. If you think this is a video that somebody else can benefit from, please share it with them, and you can hit the like button as well so that YouTube knows to share this video with the greater YouTube world. If you check me out on podcasts, you can still keep doing that, the podcast player of your choice, by searching The How To Show. And as always, if you are looking to sell your house in the Indianapolis area, you can get in touch with me at indiedwell.com. Link is in the show notes as well. Until next time, this is Anthony Drew Gary, host of The How To Show, signing off.